Sophia of Sela was trying to escape a miserable marriage when she began a scandalous affair. She didn't know it, but she was digging more than just her own grave, and her tragic end is proof. Sophia Dorothea of Sela was the wife of the future King George III of England. Yet this fairy tale existence turned to tragedy early on. From a horrific betrayal to a 300-year-old murder mystery that's unsolved to this day. As a young man, Sophia's father, Duke George William, was supposed to marry Princess Sophia of Hanover, but he wanted to marry the woman he was actually in love with, Eleanor Dolbrus. To do this, he had to agree to give up his claim to the German territory of Lüneburg and pass it to his younger brother, Ernest Augustus, who would also marry Princess Sophia in his place. By the way, because we're talking about toffs here, basically everybody has the same name, so you'll have to pay attention. We only just started, and we're at 2 George and 2 Sophias. As part of the agreement, George and Eleanor wed in a morganatic union, meaning it wasn't recognized by the church, and their children wouldn't inherit George's titles or have any claims to the family's lands. Sophia was technically illegitimate, but her loving parents treated her like royalty all the same. Sophia grew up to be a beauty, with dark eyes, curly brown hair, and porcelain skin. Before long, she began to catch the eye of many admirers, and her father realized he had a gold mine on his hands. More specifically, he realized he could use his daughter as a pawn to regain the status he'd given up. Sophia's father wanted her to marry his brother, Ernest's son and heir, George Louis. That way, the wealth he had renounced would find its way back into the family. Pretty much everyone saw through George William's plans, and Sophia's uncle Ernest was staunchly against any match between her and his son. He and his wife felt that the illegitimate Sophia wasn't good enough for their precious son. The fact that they were cousins, not a problem at all. In response to the claims that Sophia wasn't good enough, the Duke decided to make Sophia legitimate, at long last, and, with the help of another quick wedding ceremony, declared that his marriage was not morganatic anymore, but rather valid in the eyes of the church. This was a violation of the agreement he'd made with his family. Sophia's father knew how to play the game, and he began transferring masses of his assets over to her, financially plumping her up as a very eligible bride indeed. His brother was horrified at everything the Duke was doing to erode away his promises from all those years ago, not to mention the damage he was doing to their house's laws of succession. Because George Louis and Sophia were cousins, they'd known each other since childhood and hated each other just as long. There wasn't much of anything to like in George. He was serious to the point of dullness and was only interested in hunting and battle. In fact, probably the only thing the pair had in common was their opposition to marrying each other. It wasn't just Sophia and George who disliked each other. George's entire family hated that side of their relations. Sophia and her mother, Eleanor, most particularly. After all, George's mother was Sophia of Hanover, the woman our Sophia's father had jilted and then passed off to his brother. George's mother made sure everyone in Sophia's family knew how much she detested them. In her protestations against the marriage, she brought up Eleanor's lack of royal breeding, saying she was mouse dirt mixed among the pepper. Geez! The truth was, Sophia and her father were terrifically rich, which was quite the enticement. Eventually, George and his parents, too distracted by the glint of gold, couldn't really remember what their objections were in the first place. Sophia of Hanover wrote a letter to her niece saying, $100,000 a year is a goodly sum to pocket, without speaking of a pretty wife, who will find a match in my son George Louis, the most pig-headed stubborn boy who ever lived, who has round his brains such a thick crust that I defy any man or woman ever to discover what is in them. He does not care much for the match itself, but $100,000 a year have tempted him, as they would have tempted anybody else. put that in a Hallmark card immediately. When Sophia's father told her she had to marry George, she reportedly threw a small portrait of him against the wall and declared, "I will not marry the pig snout." It is a strong nose, to be fair. But despite this outburst, as well as other objections from Sophia's mother, the patriarch doggedly kept making marriage plans. The wedding took place on November 21, 1682, and Sophia's father quickly set up the 16-year-old at George's home court of Hanover. But the cracks began showing immediately. George, obviously still thinking he was better than his low-born bride, immediately started criticizing everything from her poor etiquette to her generous spending habits. Mortal enemies or not, Sophia and George knew their duty, and soon Sophia popped out a son, George Augustus, another George, as well as a daughter, Sophia Dorothea. And even while heavily pregnant, Sophia knew how to charm. Many people in the Hanoverian court, as well as courts as far-flung as Italy, found her both beautiful and excellent company. Not that any of this mattered to George. Her social successes only annoyed him, and then he resorted to full-blown betrayal. Right around the time that Sophia was pregnant with her daughter, George decided it was the perfect moment to take a mistress. He seduced his mother's maid of honor, Melusine von der Schulenburg. When Sophia inevitably discovered the tryst, she was so upset that she became ill. Indeed, she was in such bad shape that her doctors worried she would miscarry. It was so serious that, in a rare moment of being a normal human, even Sophia's mother-in-law ordered George to sit near his wife and hold her hand while she recovered. After the birth of their daughter, it's all but certain that Sophia and George entirely stopped sleeping together, and they had no more children. George and Melusine, however, were an entirely different story. Sophia had to watch from the sidelines as they had not one but 3 illegitimate children together. For all their years of unhappiness, Sophia hadn't yet learned that her husband's temper was far more dangerous than her own. In an argument between the miserable couple, George tried to strangle his wife in front of his mistress. Sophia was beside herself with grief and anger at this point, but there was little she could do. Everyone, from her in-laws to her own parents, advised her to suck it up. They also made sure to remind her that George, who had a connection to the royal line through his mother, would likely be King of England one day. If she showed some patience, she could be queen. Just as her marriage seemed to hit rock bottom, Sophia reconnected with an old acquaintance. Philip von Königsmarck was a handsome Swedish count who had been a page in her household growing up. When she met him as an adult, sparks flew immediately. After all, they were both attractive, charming people, and Sophia desperately needed to get away from her dour husband. Sophia and Philip exchanged hundreds of letters to each other over the course of their relationship. They allude to a deep passion and knowledge of each other that only lovers would have, with Philip writing in one, "When I remember all our exquisite transports, all our sweet violence, I forget my grief. What ardor, what fire, what love have we not tasted together? Shall we ever enjoy those precious moments again?" Sophia's affair was top secret. To evade suspicion, she even got her lady-in-waiting to transcribe her letters to Philip. That way, if someone intercepted them, the handwriting would imply that the attendant was having an affair with Philip, and Sophia would be in the clear. Despite their precautions, it became common knowledge in the royal court that Sophia and Philip were a little too friendly. Suspicious, George did his hypocritical best to keep them apart, sending Philip away from Hanover and finding all kinds of ways to refuse him entry if he tried to stroll in. In love with Philip and still truly hating her husband, Sophia went to her parents and begged them to support an official separation from George. Political interests outweighed any love or obligation they felt toward their daughter. And again, George was going to be King of England. With nowhere to turn, Sophia went from desperate to unhinged. Tired of sneaking around or asking for permission on the sly, Sophia and Philip made plans to escape Hanover together. After all, Sophia's life of luxury at the palace meant nothing to her if she couldn't be with the man she loved. Before Sophia and Philip could ride off into the sunset, the powerful Countess von Platen began trying to pressure Philip into marrying her daughter. Philip, too in love with Sophia to think of anyone else, refused her outright. It was a grave mistake. The furious Countess hit back, going to Sophia's husband and revealing everything she knew about her affair with Philip. One night, when Sophia was waiting for Count Philip to come to her chamber as usual, he never showed up. In fact, he never showed up anywhere, ever again. And over the course of the next days and weeks, it became clear that Sophia's lover was officially a missing person. The mystery behind Count Philip's disappearance has haunted history for 300 years, but the prevailing theory leads right back to Sophia's husband. Many believe that George, seeing red after hearing of their affair, was the man who ordered Philip's death. Some historians believe 4 courtiers weighed his body down with rocks and threw him in a river near the castle. Yet nobody knows for sure. Philip's disappearance is a mystery to this day, but in Sophia's time it left a wake of destruction. The royal court in Hanover tried to keep Philip's disappearance quiet, but it became a huge news story all over Europe. His name was on everyone's lips, and everyone wanted to solve the mystery. Even King Louis XIV took an interest in the case, to the point of sending agents to Hanover to investigate. If it wasn't bad enough that George allegedly had his wife's lover murdered, he then promptly divorced her on the grounds of abandonment. Then, not content just to be free of her, George went on to enact a vile plan to punish her for the rest of her life. After the divorce proceedings, Sophia's husband sent her to live in Alden House, a mansion in Sela, near where she grew up. But this was no cushy hideaway. She was a prisoner. She had to stay in the north wing and had a rotating crew of 40 men guarding her. With the blessing of Sophia's own father, he forbade her from remarrying and from seeing her children, ever. The day that Sophia said goodbye to her children to go to Alden House, she didn't realize that she would never set eyes on them again. Her son George, who would become King George II of England, and her daughter Sophia, who would become Queen in Prussia, held a grudge against their father for the rest of their lives. Once Sophia realized she wouldn't be allowed to leave Alden, she fell into a depressed stupor. She never once tried to escape. And then, on more optimistic days, she wrote pleading letters to her relatives. In one, she begged her ex-husband to simply allow her to see her children. He never responded. In 1705, Sophia's father was on his deathbed when he had a change of heart over his treatment of his daughter. He begged those around him for the chance to visit with Sophia and reconcile. But his politically minded ministers forbade him from doing it, lest he anger the powerful George. In 1714, when Sophia had been trapped in Alden House for 20 years, her ex-husband fulfilled his royal potential and became King George I of England. During her imprisonment at Alden, Sophia kept close tabs on her children, so she was more than aware when her daughter, now Queen in Prussia, was nearby visiting her father. She hoped that the girl would make a sneaky detour to visit, and dressed in her finest clothes to wait by the window every day for her arrival. She was in for a crushing disappointment. Still terrified of her father's wrath, even as an adult, Sophia's daughter never made the trip. Even as she waited by the windows to see her daughter's face, her body was betraying her. She had grown sickly and overweight, and less than a year after, she suffered a stroke. On November 13, 1726, Sophia succumbed to liver failure and gallbladder occlusion, dying at the age of 60. On her death, King George I of England showed just what a pig snout he really was. He announced her passing in the papers, but also explicitly forbade anyone from dressing in mourning for the mother of his children. To top it all off, he insisted that Sophia was buried without any ceremony. She was eventually put to rest secretly at nighttime beside her parents in Selah. Sophia's children had lived under their father's iron will for far too long, and his treatment of their mother's death finally put them over the edge. In defiance of the no mourning edict, Sophia's daughter had all her courtiers in Berlin wear black, sending her father into a rage. In the end, George died just 7 months after Sophia. Her son became King George II, and having no lost love for his father, didn't even attend the old monarch's funeral. Thanks for watching History Expose. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring with us. Don't forget to visit our main page, Factornate, for more incredible facts about everything. Music